Let's talk about the last Dynamite of the year. New Year's Smash. AEW Dynamite, December the 27th, 2023. What a show. Matches long as hell. Segments long as hell. A lot occurred. Let's get into it because I got a lot of thoughts. So we're going to talk about this, all right? So Jon Moxley wins the Gold League, defeating Swerve Strickland and Jay White. This leaves a lot of people with bad taste in their mouth because they're like, why on earth are they pushing Jon Moxley again? Moxley wins again. This should have been Swerve's moment. This should have been Swerve's time. And you know what? I agree with you. I really do. Unfortunately, Tony Khan doesn't. Tony Khan, I guess, is going to position Swerve in the world title picture. That's why he did the segment with MJF the previous week. But Swerve really needed something. And Moxley doesn't really need anything. If we're being honest, Moxley being booked like Superman is absolutely ridiculous. Like if you were the kind of guy who thinks that John Cena was super booked, how can you say anything about Jon Moxley? I mean, the guy fights through everything, no sells a bunch of stuff. It is absolutely crazy. He's Iron Man, Iron Moxley, for Christ's sake. I mean, that's what we got going. Talking about Super Cena. We think he's talking about Iron Moxley. Like, actually, Moxley's a war machine in this joint. Anyway, Jon Moxley ended up pinning Jay White to win the match. They did a spot for Danielson and Eddie Kingston, built off from Collision, where they did promos and everything, where Danielson saying that Eddie Kingston is a bum. And apparently there was a sign that says Eddie Kingston is a bum on all this kind of stuff. And Danielson essentially is running with the storyline that Eddie Kingston sucks and Eddie Kingston's not that good. He doesn't have the determination. He doesn't have the guts, yada, yada, yada. Essentially, he's borrowing CM Punk's storyline with Eddie Kingston. I don't know if you guys remember the Eddie Kingston CM Punk story was based off of Punk believing that Eddie Kingston wasted his potential and all this kind of stuff, right? So it seems like Danielson is just, there's going to be a lot of Danielson talk on this show. But it seems like Danielson is inheriting a lot of CM Punk's authority, his position in AEW, but he's also inheriting more jobs than Punk ever did before in his life. But that seems to be what's going on here. Oh, it worked with everybody saying that Eddie Kingston is a bum, he's a fat slob, and all this kind of stuff. That works. So let's just use that in terms of a story. So that's the story going into the Blue League final. Bryan Danielson saying that Eddie Kingston was a bum, and this is supposed to get the fans behind him, which they did. And Eddie Kingston won the match that I thought was fairly pedestrian and boring. I said that Eddie Kingston was going to win this tournament from the beginning. There was no surprise to me that he was going to win this match. Also, Bryan Danielson is not booked strong in AEW. It's not. This guy came fresh off of a WrestleMania main event, and they have booked him as an underneath guy. Even when they tried to put him in epic matches, it's just basically a long match. There was no storyline build to most of the stuff that he's done. Has not been substantial. So, of course, he would lose to Eddie Kingston and put Eddie Kingston over. Eddie Kingston looks like a guy drawn by Frank Miller. Of course, he would get to go over in the tournament. And I knew he was going to win anyway. I mean, he put 2 championships up for the tournament. Of course, he was going to win. And the finals is in New York. Of course, he's going to win. But why put Danielson in this position when you could have Danielson in the main event? That's the thing, I've seen people online say, well, Danielson didn't want that. He doesn't want to be in the main event. He doesn't want to be world champion. This is where you step in as the guy who's paying for all of this. And you say, look, I get what your idea of, what you want to do is, but here's what we need from you. As the owner and operator of this company, this is what I need from you. You're a recognizable name. You've sold merchandise before. I need you to be my top guy or one of my top guys. I don't need you to be an upper mid-card guy who does far too many jobs. Danielson lost more in this tournament than fucking Brody King, if I remember correctly. I think Danielson lost twice in this tournament. I think Brody King only lost once. It's kind of ridiculous, bro. I think Brody King lost twice. I don't know. My memory is shoddy. I don't pay attention to that stuff. In any event, Danielson being in this tournament did not raise his stock. It also didn't raise the stock of the tournament. And to me, it just seemed like he has been absolutely wasted in AEW. The potential that he came in with was shredded. And look, he's been there for almost 2 years now. I think he's actually been there 2 years. It's over. You know, he's staring down the barrel of retirement now. And he means less now than when he got there. Who the hell is going to care about this guy when he finally leaves? Like, you're not getting the most out of Danielson. At least I don't think so. Now, Eddie Kingston is a guy that they really want to push. It's a guy that AEW really wants to make a star. They've been having this slow trajectory upwards for Eddie Kingston, even though the guy was already like in his mid-30s when he got there. But he's a beloved underdog character. So Jon Moxley comes out, and him and Eddie Kingston have a face-off. Eddie Kingston is still breathing heavy. You know, look at Moxley in the face. Moxley says that he wants Eddie Kingston to do his best at World's End. He says that Kingston is paranoid, thinks everybody's out to get him, thinks everybody hates him. But all the people seem to love Eddie Kingston. There's people in the back who respect Eddie Kingston. There's a bunch of people who love Eddie Kingston, and they deserve for Eddie Kingston to bring his best. Then he talked about the previous times they had matches where he allowed Eddie Kingston to go out with pride. He allowed Eddie Kingston to fall on his sword. He gave him a warrior's death last time, essentially. But this time, he's not going to do Eddie Kingston any favors. So Eddie Kingston needs to bring his A game. He says, look, you know you can't beat me. I know you can't beat me. They believe you can't beat me. So you've already lost. So you already in your mind, you're making excuses, but you're not going to get any favors this time. If you're going to win this match, you're going to need to fight for every inch. And of course, they threw in there that, you know, Eddie Kingston wants to be like his heroes, Toshiaki Kawada, and all these guys who won Triple Crowns in all Japan. So Eddie Kingston gets the microphone, says that you don't talk to me like I'm no young boy. I ain't no young boy. I'm your senpai. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? I was in this business before you. I brought you up. You was under my wing. And then he goes off about how he's the king of the bums, which pops me out. Huge pop for that. Then he says that when he wanted to quit AEW, it was Moxley who pulls him to the side and says, no, you can't quit. We need guys like you to shake up the young guys. And I thought this was great. I thought the promo segment was pretty good. Moxley, Kingston. Okay. I'm not thrilled about the finals because of all of the other potential options, but whatever. The Continental Classic, as far as I'm concerned, was an absolute waste. I hate this thing. I really don't like it. I don't think it has drawn very well. I don't think it has elevated anybody. Everybody who was in the match in these matches, they just had good matches, which is what most of these people were known for anyway. So what's the point? What was the benefit? Now everybody is, you know, who was in the tournament is either not doing anything or they're going back to a really old feud, like Swerve. Swerve is not going to go back to a feud that's almost a year old with Keith Lee, because Keith Lee finally now has time, and it's only because Tony Khan didn't have anything else booked for this show. Decided that Keith Lee and Swerve Strickland need to finish their business, so they're going to have a match at World's End. Now, Miro and Andrade, they actually have been telling that story during the tournament, that Miro promised that he wasn't going to put his hands on Andrade while the tournament was going on, but now the tournament is over, so Miro wants to fight Andrade. Okay, so now Andrade has spinned off into this thing with Miro that's over CJ Perry. Swerve is spinning out into to finish his feud with Keith Lee, that you have to be a dedicated AEW fan to even remember, because it was so long ago when they actually did anything or even spoke about each other. It's almost as if Tony Khan got bullied into finishing this feud. So now they're finally going to have a one-on-one match. And how dare you say that it's been way too long since, before you pick up this thread and say it's a story. Like, this thing died on the vine. You're supposed to pick the fruit while it's ripe, not while it's dead, sir. This thing is dead now. Anyway, but most of the other guys in the tournament, they ain't got nothing going. Danielson is, again, one of your top stars. He's not going to be at the show. He's not going to be on World's End at all, apparently. Neither will Jay White, who is apparently another one of your top stars. He's not going to be on the show. You went through all the trouble of pushing Brody King. He's not on the show. So you did this tournament, and now all of these guys that you were pushing as being top guys, they're either not on the show or they're in some kind of break glass in case of emergency match that you can throw on the card in order to fill it out. Okay, look, I actually prefer when they were doing silly stuff like the Casino Battle Royal and the Casino Ladder Match to do this tournament. As much as I didn't like the Casino Ladder Match and the Casino Battle Royal, at least they were doing stuff that was somewhat unique. That was, has something to do with creating a new brand for AEW. Now, yes, this Continental Classic kind of does the same thing. But again, we've seen these round robin tournaments before. TNA did them, and it didn't appeal to anybody then. I don't see it really appealing to many people now. As much as we kind of crapped off the gimmicky nature of the Casino Battle Royals and what they had to pull suits and all this kind of stuff, as silly as all that stuff was, at least it was one match that you could watch that and then move on. And it's not like 2 months of dry tournament broccoli that you're supposed to like because you're supposed to love real graps. They just serving you up Brussels sprouts every week and you're supposed to be like, oh, I love this. Like, nah. Sometimes we want some kooky stuff where a guy has to climb and grab a poker chip. Why not? That's much more interesting than watching big dumb tattooed guy who is like the third most interesting dude in his group get work for 25 fucking minutes on television. Come on, bro. Get out of here with that. Anyway, I don't know. I'm wrong, I guess. Whatever. Mariah May, she's back, and she's here to talk about her debut, which is going to be next week. She's then chased by Riho, and Riho is then chased by Toni Storm. And as Mariah May bails, Toni Storm tries to attack Riho and fails and ends up getting beat up by Riho. The less I talk about Riho, the better. And Toni Storm, she's like barefoot like 99% of the time now. She's in her Matt Riddle, Kevin Von Erich era. She like never wears shoes now. Like never. It's a very weird gimmick that she just kind of runs around. Like, was that Hollywood, old Hollywood? They walked around barefoot all the time? I don't know. She's comfortable, I'm sure, except for when she steps on all that metal. All right, so backstage, Top Flight and Action Andretti wanted to have another match. They had an open challenge. They got picked up by Orange Cassidy and some other guys. And I didn't care about this. And then Action Andretti did some weird stuff with a can. Why do this? Like, what is this really? You could have just announced this in passing. Like, nobody cares about this match. Like, these little inserts that seem to lead nowhere, just announce these things in passing. Just announce in passing that Orange Cassidy is going to be teaming with so-and-so and so-and-so versus Top Flight and Action Andretti. We don't need to see you build this because it's not going to get anybody to watch the show. You've tried this for like 6 months or whatever. These people are not draws. They're not people who are interesting characters. You're not doing anything interesting with them. It's not furthering any story, really, outside of Orange Cassidy is behaving weirdly. And it doesn't seem to really be helping anybody. All right, moving on. Don Callis and Tony Schiavone. So let's shorten this thing up because this thing seemed to go on forever. And this was a very, very busy segment. Don Callis and his crew have been missing for weeks. They have been missing for weeks. And I don't mean 4 weeks. I think they've been gone longer than 4 weeks. Because I don't know when the last time I saw Powerhouse Hobbs or Big Tank, I think is what Sammy Guevara called Konosuke Takeshita. Yeah, you haven't seen these guys in forever. So here they are. Don Callis mentioned something about having personal issues, but now it's boxing week and he's got gifts for his guys, and it's all portraits. It's all art pieces. I love these Don Callis art pieces. So he puts them over. Everybody notices that Sammy Guevara is not there. Then Sammy Guevara shows up. He's there, and the crowd is actually chanting for him. They're cheering for him, which, of course, is the prelude because it must have slipped out somewhere that Sammy Guevara is going to turn babyface. So Sammy is there. Don Callis unveils his portrait that has Sammy surrounded by the Don Callis family with the baby and everything, smiling. And Sammy Guevara is upset that there's a baby in his picture. Who told you to put my baby in the picture? And Don Callis, of course, starts going on about how he's disappointed in Sammy Guevara because Sammy Guevara disappeared and didn't show up for weeks to work, and he's going to be a mediocre parent just like he's a mediocre wrestler. Of course, this turns Sammy Guevara babyface, and he attacks Don Callis, and he gets jumped. Then, of course, Chris Jericho comes out there to save Sammy Guevara, and then we get the reunion of Sammy Guevara and Chris Jericho. Now, we're going to stop right here. Okay. Let's pause right now. I'm not against turning Sammy Guevara babyface. I'm not against that. I'm not against that because it is a situation where Kenny Omega is down with illness. You have to do something. And they already sort of teased last week that Jericho was going to continue challenging for the tag team championship. He's just going to do so with a different partner. The issue that I have here is Jericho and Guevara being friends again, because Guevara turned on Jericho before. And it seems to me like Sammy Guevara is like, the little baby duckling in that movie Migration, where, he's just following Chris Jericho around everywhere he goes. He cannot it's been 4 years and he can't get away from Chris Jericho. Now, it's a positive for the long narrative for Jericho to be the guy who helped Sammy Guevara, because he still wanted to be friends with Sammy, but Sammy turned on him. So it's him having the olive branch and reaching out to Sammy, and Sammy forgiving Sammy, and Sammy coming back and being back under his wing. But that's the problem, is Sammy Guevara has spent so much time tied together with Chris Jericho that it's almost as if he can't get anywhere in his career without Chris Jericho. Like, either he's with Chris Jericho or he's about to feud with Chris Jericho. And okay, look, as a patch to a really bad situation where you have to make a decision, it's not the worst decision that you could possibly make in terms of turning Sammy Guevara babyface. Now, the reason they turned Sammy Guevara babyface is not one that I'm a big fan of. So Sammy Guevara is angry at Don Callis for putting his baby in this picture, even though the picture was not disrespectful in any way. It's not like, they were football kicking the baby. If anything, Sammy Guevara should have noticed that there was no Ty Mello in the picture and that she was not part of the family. And that should have been his thing, is like, hey, look, all of you guys, usually, we all get along, but my wife is not in this picture. Why am I surrounded by guys? Like, there's a bunch of men in this thing. But he was upset that Don Callis didn't call when he had a concussion. He's upset that Don Callis didn't call when they had the baby. And he feels alienated from Don Callis. And Don Callis is a cold, evil person. He's not going to be the guy who's going to call to make sure you're okay. What kind of crazy shit is that? Like, you should have known what you were doing business with. In any event, let's try to move this thing forward. Jericho and Sammy Guevara are jumped by Big Bill and Ricky Starks, which is completely unnecessary, but they did that. The lights go out. It's Sting! It's Sting! And Darby Allin. And they fight Big Bill and Ricky Starks. And now it's an 8-man tag at the pay-per-view, instead of it being the tag team championship match that it was supposed to be. They have changed it to an 8-man tag. So it's Jericho, Guevara, Darby Allin, and Sting. versus the Don Callis family, Big Bill and Ricky Starks, which is a waste of Big Bill and Ricky Starks because you're putting them in this very crowded match. I did not like that. All right, like if you want to say Jericho comes out there and says, Sammy, I want you to be my tag team partner, the Sex Gods, and we're going to challenge for the tag team titles, you and me, we're going to do this thing. And then Guevara, of course, would accept, and they would go on and have the match. They don't need to win, but, you got to have the match. By making it an 8-man tag, you basically have diluted Ricky Starks, and this guy has been fighting uphill to get a push in this company. He's at least going to be on the card, but for Christ's sake, he went from being spotlighted in a tag team feud to now just being one of a bunch of guys in this 8-man tag. It's a disaster. Okay, Roderick Strong has a chart. And all roads point to MJF being the devil. And he's going to expose MJF as the devil, whether it's today, tomorrow, and he didn't show back up on this show. So, Renee! Roderick Strong! Whatever. Okay. Christian was waiting all night to do a face-to-face with Edge. Now, this was an interesting bit because Shayna Wayne is there. And I know I didn't do a review of Collision. So let's talk about this Shayna Wayne segment for 1 second. So Shayna Wayne comes out on Collision. She's with Christian. And she got a real sour face on. It's very funny, actually. The humor is expanded when all of the people online, all these AEW fans, are lusting after Shayna Wayne on the Twitter machine. Like she's the hottest MILF of all time. The amount of thirst that was on Twitter was surprising. I'm not going to say, look, she was out there. She looked like an old waitress. And if we're not even going to hold you up, she dressed like an old waitress. She's wearing City Trends gear, okay? So she comes out there and says the obvious. Edge tried to bust her son's head open, so she's not siding with Edge. She sides with Christian. Christian then starts to basically allude that he's banging Nick Wayne's mom. I don't remember the exact words. I didn't take any notes on this because I don't review Collision. But the implication is that Shayna Wayne is now the matriarch to his patriarch and that he is banging Nick Wayne's mom. And Nick Wayne is standing there, pencil neck geek 100%, smiling at the thought of his mom fucking Christian. Like if your mom was fucking your basketball coach, like would you be standing there smiling about it? Really? Would you want everybody to know that your mom is banging the pastor, or that your mom is like what is this? Why would you do this? That's so weird, man. It's so weird. It's funny as hell, but it's weird. Okay. Now I'm not grossed out to the point where, I think it's absolutely over the top. I love the goofy stuff of wrestling, so I'm okay with Christian standing there implying that he did dirty deeds with Shayna Wayne. All right. My issue is that Nick Wayne is standing there with the smug face as if, he got away with something. He's like Sylvester who ate Tweety. He's standing there with a smile on his face. I'm like, what is going on here? Why is he so happy about this? It's one thing to be like, okay, well, it's kind of my fault, but it's another thing for you to be standing there smiling about it. Like it's very odd. It's very, very odd. So anyway, Shayna Wayne's promo was delivered absolutely awfully. She was not good in delivering very basic promo that Edge cracked her son's head open. She couldn't even get that part out in a convincing way. Her acting is awful, but then again, what did we expect? She's a non-wrestler and she's not trained. So it is what it is. But you would think that all she had to do was imagine somebody doing something terrible to her son and being able to bring that emotion out. She couldn't even get that out. She goes on the Mount Rushmore of terrible wrestling promos only because she actually did a wrestling promo in the ring. but I'm going to put an asterisk next to it because she's a non-wrestler. So it's going to be in the same as like the what was that kid? What was his name? LeVar Ball or something like that on Raw. When they were awful. They were really awful. But you can't count them as, terrible wrestling promos because they're not wrestlers. They're not trained to do this. They're basically just on screen adding a little bit of color to the story. She was awful. Not entirely her fault. They should have coached her a little bit more. Anyway, Christian is waiting all night for Edge. They're supposed to do this face-to-face thing that he was promised. Edge shows up like an hour after Christian has already sat there and prepared for it. And they basically just get into a fight. And a bunch of wrestlers and security guards or whatever separate them. It's not that big a deal, but there's a lot of contact between these two guys here. Okie dokie. They're going to have a no disqualification match for the championship. All right, I guess. Edge needs some backup, don't he? Well, I guess not really, actually. Not really. But I don't expect Edge to win because I expect the Luchasaurus to show up and cost him the belt. All right, so the next match. Sky Blue defeats Chris Statlander because Julia Hart interferes. So Julia Hart, who is apparently the breakout star of 2023. Look, I don't put a lot of stock in these wrestling awards, but the New York Post thing, that one thing, it gave me a splinter, and not like a CJ Perry splinter where that thing looked gangrenous, like she's going to lose her whole hand. She claims she got it backstage at Dynamite, but I'm swear she went to Mexico and probably got that gangrenous splinter. Anyway, that one thing bothered me a lot. That in a competition between Julia Hart and Tiffany Stratton, they chose Julia Hart. That's a really weird, I have to sit down. I will have to read it and try to figure out what the rationale was. Because I don't dislike Julia Hart. I'm not going to sit here and say Julia Hart is awful or she's terrible or she the shits. What I'm saying is if you look at the year that Tiffany Stratton had, and she main evented a pay-per-view, how can you say that Julia Hart was the breakout star of the year? I don't know. But again, I don't put a lot of stock into those things, but I feel like if we're going to talk about Julia Hart, I got to mention it. Congratulations to Julia Hart, by the way. A lot of people were very excited for her. I'm a fan. I like her, but not over Tiffany Stratton. Forget it. Anyway, whatever. Now, Julia Hart and Sky Blue, they're best buds. I don't think it's explained why they're best buds, but they are now. They worked the tag team match on Collision, where they had a really great picture of Sky Blue worshiping Julia Hart, kind of. And so they had this match where you would think, common sense, that Chris Statlander would beat the shit out of Sky Blue because Chris Statlander is a legitimate contender to the world title, you would think. But no, Sky Blue actually won the match because of Julia Hart. Now, interesting, because why is Sky Blue winning matches now if she's not going to challenge for any championships? She shouldn't be winning matches. She's a crony now. It would have made sense if she was on her own and she won matches because then she's building her credibility so that she could challenge Julia Hart or Toni Storm. But now she's a heel, just like Julia Hart, and she's actually allied with Julia Hart, and she's not going to wrestle Toni Storm. So why is she winning matches? She should have not won this match. Very weird. But Chris Statlander loses. After the match, Julia Hart and Sky Blue beat up Chris Statlander, and they seem to be beating her unmercifully before Willow decides to come out there. And look, I love me some Willow. She's very cute. I don't understand why her pants are pulled up so high, but she's very cute. I mean, her pants are up very high. Not quite Urkel-ish, but not far off. I think baby girl's hips are way up here, but whatever. So she finally came out there and helped Chris Statlander. Stokely Carmichael was on commentary. Who the hell cares about that guy? He has added absolutely nothing to anything that he's been doing. People have been talking a lot about this guy. He was special. I saw him in Evolve. I saw him in NXT. He, outside of doing cringe nigga humor, he don't really do that much, if we're being honest. He's not that special. Prince Nana did a dance and got more over than him. And he's supposed to be like the real manager of like AEW, but whatever. Moving on very quickly. Saraya got Ruby Soho a gift because it's her birthday is coming up. And it's Harley Cameron. Harley Cameron is Ruby Soho's gift. And it says, she's do whatever you want. And Harley Cameron is beautiful. My goodness, she's beautiful. And then she whipped out a knife. And I was like, huge pop. Because I didn't see that coming. And she just got like a random knife. And I'm just like, Now, why would you have a knife? What do we need that for? What you butchering? So apparently, Saraya is about to do some stuff with Harley Cameron that involves a knife or her being crazy or something to that effect. All right. I guess we'll have to see. Where it goes. All right. I guess. All right. The main event of the show. MJF defends the ROH Tag Team Championship against the Devil's Masked Men, and he actually loses the match because Samoa Joe is injured off screen. Samoa Joe was, my knee, So he tries to, MJF is like, I'm going to fight by myself, and he ends up getting attacked by a third guy with a pipe. He gets hit with a heat seeker and pinned. So MJF loses the ROH Tag Team Championships to the Devil's Mask guys, and the crowd could not have cared less. You could have heard a mouse fart in that arena. They did not give a fuck about the finish to this match. They don't care about these guys at all. All right. So then Samoa Joe comes out after the match is over, wielding a chair, and it couldn't be more obvious. Like if you it's more obvious than Snow White, okay? It's more obvious than Aladdin. It's more obvious than The Lion King. It's more obvious than a movie you've seen 100 times in a row. As soon as Samoa Joe came out there with that chair, you knew Samoa Joe was about to turn on MJF. So the devil has a sign that says, pleasure doing business with you, and MJF is like, what? What's that? And then Samoa Joe attacked him from behind with the chair, hit him with a muscle buster. Whole time, Samoa Joe was like, I did this to you, young Maxwell. And so it was all a setup. MJF was set up by Samoa Joe and the devil. They're working together. So Samoa Joe is not the devil, but he is working together with the devil. And they screwed MJF out of these tag team championships. And why there's two masked guys who nobody knows who are now the Ring of Honor Tag Team Champions. And you know what? Good for you. Good for Ring of Honor. Absolutely. Good for Ring of Honor. It's probably going to end up being like Vincent and Dutch or something like that in order to try to make it make sense. But ultimately, this is exactly what they deserve. Or it's going to end up being the Kingdom, one or the other. But this is exactly what they deserve. As an angle, I love it for Joe and MJF because Joe needed some heat, and the more heat that he gets, the better. It's a strong segment to go off the air on, but the crowd did not care about. They don't care about this devil stuff anymore. They don't give a shit about this devil stuff anymore. They care about the Samoa Joe issue because they care about Samoa Joe. They care about MJF. They don't give a shit about this devil stuff though. And I agree with the larger audience. This devil stuff is as beyond its expiration date. I absolutely don't care about it anymore. And I can't imagine it being anybody that matters in the long term to AEW's business. So Samoa Joe is very good. The final segments here was actually pretty strong. I don't necessarily care about the Ring of Honor Tag Team Championships to be upset or offended or otherwise perturbed about those titles being put on random nobodies. It is what it is. I don't really care. But the Samoa Joe MJF issue got more heat, which is good. I just will choose to appreciate that more than anything. Okay? All right, let's do quick World's End predictions because why not? Let's just get into it, okay? Why not? All right, so there is 10 matches on this show. There's 10 matches on the show. Jesus, this show gonna be 5 hours, bro. All right. Match 1 is a dark match, a 20-man battle royal for a future AEW TNT Championship match. The participants are to be determined. They said that the TNT Championship match could be anytime, anywhere, kind of like a Money in the Bank kind of situation. I don't know who's in this, but I would imagine Brody King should win it. I mean, he did so good in the tournament, or Claudio or somebody like that should win it. Yeah, it would make a lot of sense for it to be Claudio, but he's not really getting pushed. So, what's a nobody that's being pushed in AEW? Maybe Daniel Garcia will win it or something, you know? But it is what it is. I don't really care. I'll probably watch it because I do like battle royals. But it also depends who's in it. Like if I start seeing like a certain amount of names, and it's like Orange Cassidy, Chuck Taylor, I'm like, oh no, I'm not watching that. But if it's like some decent names in here, maybe I'll watch it. Hook versus Wheeler Yuta, FTW rules match for the FTW championship. Wheeler Yuta already has a title. It is the Ring of Honor Pure Championship. So I would imagine that Hook is going to win the FTW rules match, and then they're going to have a pure rules match, and Wheeler Yuta is going to win that. At least that's my idea of what they're going to do. So they're going to, it makes no sense. This FTW title is not sanctioned. Hook is in a very bad position. You would think with all the momentum that Hook has had over the last year, especially when he first really got started, they would have pushed him forward on the card. But then you can look at a guy like Sammy Guevara or a guy like Darby Allin, who they say is a pillar of the company. And those guys seem to be stuck in the mud. So, of course, a guy like Hook, who, you know, theoretically should have been getting pushed a little bit more, is not being pushed at all. So he's now doing underneath stuff with like Jack Perry and Wheeler Yuta. Okay, sure, go for it. We'll go with Hook, of course. Julia Hart versus Abaddon. They have 2 women's matches on this show, which is a AEW record, if I remember correctly. Julia Hart's not losing to Abaddon. And listen, Abaddon sucks. She is a gimmick. She's a character. If you're going to do gimmicky character stuff with her, that would be fun. That would be interesting. But if you're going to try to sell us on a wrestling match featuring Abaddon, get the hell out of here. If you're going to do Bray Wyatt-y, Undertaker-ish stuff where she crawls from under the ring or she covers people in worms or something like that, then that could be interesting. But if you just want to try to sell her as a wrestler, forget it. She sucks. She's awful. She's an awful wrestler. Julia Hart is going to win. Timeless Toni Storm versus Riho for the AEW Women's World Title. Toni Storm's going to win, clearly. But I don't care to see this. I don't care to see Riho. Those women's matches are going to be bathroom breaks. It's highly unfortunate because I like Toni Storm and I like Julia Hart. I don't like their opponents, so the opponents suck. Kyle Fletcher, Powerhouse Hobbs, Big Bill, and Ricky Starks versus Chris Jericho, Sammy Guevara, Darby Allin, and Sting. It's Sting. Clearly, Sting is not going to lose. So the babyfaces are going to win this match. Poor Ricky Starks, like I said, not only is he crowded in this match, but he's also probably going to lose it because bum-ass Kyle Fletcher is in it. And he, even though he has a belt, he's apparently the Ring of Honor television champion. At least I think that's what that belt is. I don't remember. I don't remember. And it don't matter. The babyfaces are going to win. What's next? Yeah. Swerve versus Keith Lee in a singles match. Swerve has to win, I suppose, right? Keith Lee is going nowhere fast. Swerve, at the very least, is working angles with MJF, and there is some potential there for him to do other things. So, Swerve? Keith Lee just is another guy stuck in the mud. Miro versus Andrade El Idolo. Look at me, Andrade El Idolo. Look at me. And this is an interesting match here because it could go either way. This is probably the most either way match on the show in terms of the story could continue regardless of who wins. You know, if Andrade wins, you could continue the story. If Miro wins, you could continue the story. So you have some options here with both guys. Now, in terms of who I'm going to pick, Andrade picked up a lot of losses in this tournament. I don't know what his. I think he lost twice or something like that. So I'm guessing he's going to beat Miro. You can always do quick roll up, small package or something like that, and then have Miro chase him and try to kill him afterwards. He can go all Incredible Hulk on him after the match. So I guess you could do that. So I'm going to go with Andrade El Idolo. Next, Jon Moxley versus Eddie Kingston for the AEW Triple Crown Championship. And this is the finals of the Continental Classic. I was pretty clear earlier, and I have not changed my mind. Eddie Kingston is going to win the tournament and become the American Triple Crown Champion, because this whole thing was put together for Eddie Kingston so that he can live his dream of winning a round-robin tournament like all the guys he watched on tapes in the 90s, because it's 1998 all the time in the mind of Eddie Kingston. And he's just like all of his chubby Japanese heroes like Misawa and Kawada. Why can't he be like Kenta Kobashi, who actually had personality and fire and stuff like that? No, it's got to be one of the chubby guys. Get the fuck out of here, fat boy. MJF versus Samoa Joe, AEW World Heavyweight Championship. Obviously, MJF is going to win. Now, I would actually love it if Samoa Joe won, but it doesn't seem to be the direction that they're going in. I think they're going to go with Swerve and MJF next, so MJF is going to win. Samoa Joe, highly unfortunate for him that he's stuck in the middle of this devil nonsense, but it is what it is. So I'm going to go with MJF, but I love me some Samoa Joe, and I really hope Samoa Joe eventually becomes world champion. All right. No DQ match, Christian Cage versus Adam Copeland, or as we call him, Edge. His mama called him Edge, I call him Edge. Clearly, Christian is going to win because Luchasaurus has not come back yet. So you have this built-in story of Luchasaurus coming out of nowhere, returning from getting his head crushed, and costing Edge the belt. Now, they may try to do something slick where they try to make Luchasaurus a babyface by coming out and attacking Christian, and basically him blaming Christian for his injury or whatever. Now, you could do that, but I think you'll be outsmarting yourself. Let's go ahead and let Edge take this L, because he doesn't need that belt anyway. It's not going to do him any good. So I'm going to go with Edge losing the match to Christian. Christian maintaining his title, and probably the TNT title being used to put over some young guy. And Christian's really good for that. Who that young guy would be, it'll probably end up being Luchasaurus, if we're being honest. Because I truly believe that all of this is a stealth Luchasaurus push. They're trying to do something with him. And they may even have Luchasaurus and Jack Perry work together again or something like that. But in any event, that's what I expect. I expect Luchasaurus is going to cost Edge the match. They're probably going to continue that part of the feud. And then likely, Luchasaurus will turn on Christian later and probably win the TNT title back. If we're being honest, it's been booking malpractice with guys like Hook and Powerhouse Hobbs and Konosuke Takeshita. And those are the guys who probably should have been in the Continental Classic and, doing really good things and winning championships and fighting for titles and stuff like this. But that's just not what Tony Khan is into right now. He's too into, I guess, Scotty 2 Hotty being on the roster. You thought I wasn't going to talk about that? I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but Scotty 2 Hotty apparently made an appearance. I'm not going to destroy him for it. It was a dark match, or like a match for Rampage or something like that. It's not that big of a deal, but Scott Taylor is almost 50, and he's still being Scotty 2 Hotty. Man, when you get over once, you never, ever, ever drop the gimmick. Long live Scotty 2 Hotty. I'm not going to beat him over the head with it. It's a fun thing for the crowd. It's not that big a deal. Anyway, World's End, Slapdash card. A few of these matches are not even really built up. They're kind of done on the spot, similar to how Tony Khan usually does his pay-per-views. He puts an incredible amount of emphasis on television. And then when the pay-per-views roll around, it's almost like, oh shit, I forgot there's a pay-per-view coming up. Let's just slap these matches together. And there that is. So as we prepare to go off the air, we're going to talk about Dana Massey, the wife of one of the Young Bucks, leaving the company, and also the guy who does the live events. He's also leaving. So there's a little bit of an exodus going on over in AEW. Dave Meltzer, I'm not going to get too deep into the Dana Massey thing because, again, who cares? She got her job because her husband was an EVP. That's why she was head of marketing or whatever. That's why. Merchandise, whatever. It's not because she was really good at it. It's because her husband was an EVP. And to some degree, she had some experience because she apparently was helping with the Young Bucks merchandise when they were selling a bunch of merchandise in Japan. So apparently she was helping them then, and they figured, hey, we're just going to bring her in and keep the money in-house. But now they're like, we need a professional to run this. Okay, we can't just have your wife doing it because we don't sell enough merchandise. And even though we had all these guys who were over, and you had AEW fans complaining about the lack of merchandise. There were some guys breaking down how they didn't even have Sting masks for a long time for you to buy at these shows, and there was never enough merchandise. So apparently she wasn't really all that great at her job. She wasn't that great at making sure that they had enough merchandise for the individual show and not enough of a variation of merchandise so that they can sell different things and make money, lucha masks and different things of that, that people might be interested in, people who might want to buy a Bandito mask or something like that. But this also is not entirely her fault because AEW still allows the wrestlers to do their own merchandising. So if you're a wrestler, you can go, PWTs or whatever and do your own merchandise. So the company is only going to be able to present limited merchandise because the wrestlers will be able to sell their own merchandise through their website or whatever. So ultimately, the company really doesn't have an incentive to spend a lot of money on merchandise because they're probably not going to be able to sell a lot unless, the wrestler stops competing with them, for Christ's sake, unless the wrestler, they get a cut of the wrestler's PWT's material, which they probably don't. But this whole thing is a disaster. So a lot of people are leaving. There's doing it's not a complete overhaul, but they're doing some light remodeling in the office. They're going to get somebody who's more professional to run their merchandising. They're probably going to get somebody who's more professional to run their live events. And hopefully, at least in their mind, they're going to be able to sell more merchandise, especially in times like Wembley. And when they actually do have big shows with large crowds, there's going to be enough stuff there for them to make some money back on merchandise, because that was one of the big things. A lot of people who complained were people who went to Wembley and said it was nothing but t-shirts, and then they didn't have enough t-shirts and there wasn't enough variety in the t-shirts, etc. And I get it. I don't think it's fair to pile on her. We knew that she was not qualified to have the job when we heard that she was married to one of the EVPs. We knew that. So it's not her fault. She took the job, because it was offered to her. Wouldn't you? Wouldn't I? If your wife had a job or your husband had a job and says, here, all we need you to do is fill out these orders. Can you do that? Yeah, sure, I'll do that. I'm not going to blame her. It's not her fault. It's Tony Khan's fault. It's Tony Khan's fault that he did not hire somebody to do this. All right. Now, the live event business, it seems like they're going to give that guy the axe too. I think his name was Raphael Moffitt or something like that. And a lot of the fans were complaining that they were hitting the same cities too often or the same general areas too often. And it's starting to affect business. And I think he would handle the booking of the arenas, and I would imagine also the marketing of the arenas. But apparently the looking at their attendance and saying, look, this guy's clearly not doing his job, or at least he's not doing good enough. We need somebody else. We need to change it up. We need to take a different approach. And that's smart. If you're not doing what you feel like you should be doing in terms of marketing and promotions, then you need to make those changes. And I know these people have been there since the beginning, and that bothers a lot of the AEW fans because they're like, oh no, things are changing. But it's like, maybe things need to change, bro. Maybe something needed to change because these people were not the most qualified folks for these jobs. And you have people out there who might be a better fit for these jobs, but now that Mega Parek apparently is going to step down, she's not going to be the chief legal officer for AEW anymore. And various other people are now starting to leave. There's, some worry, some sweat on the brow of the AEW fan base. Now, of all of these releases, Dana Massey has been the most weird because the fans have taken, well, for starters, it was Dave Meltzer. Dave Meltzer put out there that one of the reasons why she's leaving is she felt like the company did not take up for her and her family enough during the brawl out situation. And I'm just sitting here like, why does everything go back to this brawl out thing? Everything is it is the root of all evil when it comes to AEW. It is the original sin of AEW is brawl out. Like, brawl out was months ago. If it was all about brawl out, why didn't she quit back then? But now apparently it's not that she's quitting. It's that she just will not re-sign. So she decided that the company doesn't care enough about them, so she's not going to re-sign. Look, man, you can listen to Dave Meltzer if you want to. I don't believe that's going to be the case, that she just decided that, oh, you didn't defend us enough. I think it's a simple issue of a lot of fans complained that there wasn't enough merchandise, that the merchandise division was lacking, that it wasn't very good, it wasn't strong enough, and they decided to move on. That's my view. I would like to look at this thing like it's a business decision. Now, it very well could be personal, and it very well could be that she's upset about the brawl out situation and all the negativity around it. Maybe she is. But I'm going to say, I hope that Tony Khan is at least a competent businessman, is able to look at this business and say, we could do better in these regards. So we're going to replace the people who are doing this because they're not doing a good enough job. Not that they're necessarily doing a bad job, but you're simply not doing good enough. You're not justifying your position. And we want to replace you with people who actually know what they're doing. Now, if they replace these folks with people who don't know what they're doing, or they don't seem to really give a shit about who replaces these people, then we say, okay, it might have been personal and they, was not expecting these people to leave. But if they replace them with experienced folks who know what they're doing, then it might be for the best. Not all change is bad. Not all change is good, but not all change is bad. And I want to look at these changes in their marketing and their live events, etc., as potential positives. Potentially Tony Khan finally looking and saying, we need to make a change. Now, if only he watched his television product and decided we need to make a change. All right. Thank you guys for your time. I'll talk to you guys later. Have a happy New Year.